Hello, Rena.
Hello, Dr. Bach.
Welcome, everyone, to a free association conversation between Rena K and myself, Dr. Bach Ho. We're both organic intelligence coaches. We help people reduce suffering. And
Hello, Dr. Bach.
crap, it's still going on. Sorry, I thought I muted myself. All right, that was a threshold and recovered. We're both organic intelligence coaches. We help people reduce suffering and increase capacity to handle more in life with ease using the protocols of organic intelligence. In these live stream free association conversations, Rena and I try to aim both at people who are completely new to organic intelligence and people who already know its basics. We try to find the balance. Today, our topic is what are thresholds? So I think that the most the four most important, in my opinion, the four most important concepts in organic intelligence are orientation, pleasure, auto-organization, and thresholds. Organic intelligence is a theory and practice of auto-organization. That's a technical term. It refers to increasing your capacity to handle more easily. That's auto-organization, the process of increasing that capacity. The two conditions that promote auto-organization are orientation and pleasure. And there's a lot of videos on that. Orientation is connection to the environment through the senses. I'm trying to balance the new people and people who already know some stuff. Now, thresholds. The main meaning, I think that word thresholds is used in different ways in organic intelligence by different people, and it's worth exploring that. The main meaning, and I think the most important meaning as far as the organic intelligence theory is that threshold refers to organic intensity threshold. It's a wider phrase. You could say threshold, you could say intensity threshold, you could say organic intensity threshold. And this concept refers to a set point of intensity set by your physiology, by your organism or your biology, a set point of intensity that, according to organic intelligence, if the intensity of your biology, which is different from how intense you feel, but the intensity of your biology, if it can rise to reach that threshold, not exceed it, not undercut it, not reach it and not exceed it, but reach it and then rest from it, that is what catalyzes auto-organization. That's the organic intensity threshold or threshold. That's the most important official main canonical, if there is one, meaning of threshold. And orientation and pleasure promote your biology regularly and rhythmically reaching these thresholds and then relaxing, which catalyzes auto-organization. So that's the main meaning. And at the same time, that term is used in many different ways. I think and we're here to talk about that and explore that and see where we go. A few thoughts on this issue. First, I think this is an important topic because I think threshold is one of the four most important concepts. So it's really, if you're talking about the four main concepts, orientation, pleasure, auto-organization, and thresholds, clarity and precision are good investments for these four main ones. Now, how is threshold variously used in organic intelligence? I think one major distinction is sometimes it's used to refer to physical goings on in the biology. So in more advanced lectures, Steve, the founder of organic intelligence, will sometimes talk about threshold and action potentials of neurons. And that gets into like technical stuff that's not necessary for understanding organic intelligence, but like what happens when sodium goes in here and potassium comes out, and then the action potential is reached, and then the neuron fires. So sometimes threshold, when you get to really technical, more advanced scientific parts, organic intelligence lecture material, you get threshold being used in physical goings on, which is not my main interest or my knowledge, but I'm just naming that as something that there's a context in which threshold is used to refer to physical goings on. And then the other context would be experiential goings on. And here, like how you experience your emotions, your thoughts, your experience, your feelings. And here it's used quite liberally. Like people use it in different ways. Like I enjoyed the party and then that reached a threshold and then I got kind of bored and I left, or I was angry and at my partner or my friend and then that reached a threshold. So and that gets into using threshold to mean any kind of shift. Or you could say, well, finding my partner was a major threshold, completing my PhD was a major threshold. So it gets quite liberally used.
Hmm.
So to sum up,
Interesting. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
so the main meaning is organic intensity thresholds. That's the main meaning. And it's used in different ways. Sometimes in more rarefied contexts, it's used to refer in physical goings on contexts like neurons. And often in the main, it's used kind of liberally to refer to shifts broadly construed in life or experience. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Cool. Interesting that I actually would do say it slightly differently in the sense that I would start with the concept of threshold and then add to it the idea of the organic intensity threshold.
Oh, you're wrong. Just kidding. I'm sorry. Continue, please. I enjoy what you do. Yeah.
Right? So for me, the way I understand it is that thresholds actually is fundamentally a biological happening that's going on that could be thought of on a nerve level or a cell level or on the breath level or, on and on up in terms of complexity. But in its simplest form, to me, a threshold, and if I've heard Steve correctly, is simply a state change. It's a change of state from activation to deactivation, or a change of state from deactivation to activation. And so, in some ways, that would be a physical going on if there's a state change that's happening from activation to deactivation. However, you look at that from a atomic level to a cellular level to a neuron level to the whole sense of self complex system level, it's going to indicate state changes. But you also then brought up the idea of an organic intensity threshold, which means there's something that's considered if I'm understanding you right, there's a threshold that's optimal. I think you use that word. So there are optimal levels of threshold that are going to lead to auto-organization. But a threshold can happen that's not optimal for auto-organization. That would be an example that you suggested, like, oh, it doesn't quite meet the organic optimal threshold or organic intensity threshold. And if it doesn't meet that, well, that's not going to allow auto-organization to happen. That'll just keep the status quo happening. Or conversely, if that state change happens at a level of intensity that is not optimal, that is beyond your optimal level, well, then that's also going to lead to the status quo. That's not going to lead to auto-organization. So I don't know how you take what I'm saying there in light of what you were saying.
Yes. I think I don't know if we have a disagreement. And if we did, I would have no problem saying we did have a disagreement, but I don't think we do. But so when I opened with the main meaning of threshold is the organic intensity threshold, I meant that when you encounter, well, first that concept of the organic intensity threshold is one of the most important concepts in organic intelligence, more important than just thresholds in a wider sense of any kind of shift. And that when you encounter just the word threshold, like if to my audience, if you're studying organic intelligence, if you come across people talking about it or someone wrote something on it and you come across thresholds, there's a strong chance it's short for intensity threshold or organic intensity threshold. So using that one word threshold is often short for that concept of the organic intensity threshold. At the same time, yes, the word threshold used by itself could mean what you said, which is any kind of state change. Although I may ask you what a state is because I want to but so you're saying you started with, well, there are these thresholds which are changes of state, and some of them are the organic intensity thresholds. Yes, I'm with you. And what I meant was when you use, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself too much, but I prefer over clarity rather than under clarity. So hammer is better than feather, I guess. But when you encounter threshold by itself, that word, it probably usually means organic intensity thresholds, and that is the most important concept to land. Okay. Okay.
Right.
So yeah.
Agreed.
Okay.
The reason I like to start with, okay, a threshold is just a state change, and by state change I mean going from either a state of activation to a state of deactivation, or vice versa, going from a state of deactivation to a state of activation. That is a whole organismic state. That, so in other words, the whole organism is either in the direction of intensity, rising intensity, or it's in a state of decreasing intensity. Like one of those two things are happening. And to me, one of the things that's valuable of thinking of just threshold as state change is it helps people understand that that's happening all the time. It may be happening in the direction that reinforces the status quo of their lives of that are not great, or it could be moving them in the direction of improvement in their lives. But once we understand that thresholds are just state changes, we start to see that the biology is always oscillating. Is it oscillating in an organizing direction, or is it oscillating in a disorganizing direction? And that's where the organic intensity thresholds become super important, and why I think, as you're saying, it's a key concept in organic intelligence. But if I can help people understand that thresholds are always happening, oscillations are always happening, then it helps, in a sense, just relax about the process a little bit and become less micromanaging or attempting to be micromanaging about their thresholds. So you said earlier, like people will throw that word around, like, oh, I got I got in a fight with my boyfriend and it got really intense, and then we hit a threshold and it came down, or I got to the party and I'd had enough, so I hit my threshold and I was, wanted to leave. It helps understand that language that people use the word threshold for, but none of that has anything to do with the system becoming more organized and developing greater capacity to manage the ups and downs in life, which is what organic intelligence is really after. Like that's really what we're interested in. We're not necessarily interested in state change for the sake of state change. I'm only interested in talking about it because I want people to understand these things are happening automatically and they don't have to try to tinker so much. There's some principles OI uses to help move a person and support a person moving in the direction of auto-organization. But this idea that we're going to go in and do all this tinkering with the mechanics of our system is not necessary, let alone helpful. And I'm actually going to sneeze in a second. Maybe not. Okay, there you go. I'm going to cede the floor to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And I want to maybe change what I said in the beginning of this, in my opening. I said, I feel myself, I think I'm backpedaling on something and backsliding. I said the four most important concepts are orientation, pleasure, auto-organization, and thresholds. I think now I'm thinking maybe thresholds is not as important. So let me just say, I think in the context of studying organic intelligence under the hood, like someone wants to really understand organic intelligence, what's happening, what does ventral vagal mean, what does dorsal vagal mean, is the polyvagal theory true, half true, what are the objections, what's the default mode network, what are thresholds, what are organic intensity thresholds, how do neurons fit into that? Then the concept of threshold is incredibly important. So if you're doing under the hood scientific analysis context studying of organic intelligence, it's important. If we're talking about living life, then I think I would just say the three most important concepts are orientation, pleasure, and auto-organization. Arguably, you could even drop out auto-organization. You could just get two, which is orientation and pleasure. So maybe, that's to qualify my opening thing. There are two directions in my mind. One is to ask you about some of the things you said, like what is a state? I know you, and I didn't mean to imply that I wasn't listening in your initial explanation. You said it's a change from activation to deactivation, or deactivation to activation. I got that, but I have questions about what those mean exactly, and are those more physical goings on, or felt experience, or are there two senses? And then if there are two senses, it seems like the felt experience is the more important one for living life and for practical thinking about, because since we don't really know what's happening under the hood biologically. Um, the other is just to explore how that concept threshold used loosely in felt experience can be helpful for living life. So I have those two directions.
Sure.
Um, but I'm going to keep going for a little bit before I cede to you. So yes, to affirm something you said, organic intelligence would say you can't track your thresholds. Don't try to track your thresholds. That's why you should focus on orientation and pleasure, and that will take care of things. And the threshold will be the thresholds will be reached and rest. The organic intensity thresholds will be reached and rested from as you do orientation and pleasure. And if you're if you experience too much intensity and you're wondering, is it over threshold or is it not over threshold? I think one answer from organic intelligence is it doesn't matter and whatever and keep going, because if it's over threshold, you'll get back to orientation eventually. If it's exactly a threshold, you'll get back to orientation eventually. So it's just orientation and pleasure, which is every video and every post I do is just orientation and pleasure over and over again. Okay, so don't worry about thresholds. At the same time, if you're curious, you're curious, and if you enjoy thinking about it, which we're doing in this talk right now, we're thinking about it. Um, so one one possible direction is how can that concept just be helpful? And I think one way it can be helpful is you're just noticing changes and you're calling them thresholds, which is fine. So you feel nervous and then the nervousness goes away, and then that's a threshold. Or you went for a walk, you enjoyed it, and then you stop, and then you feel like you're done, and then that's a threshold. Or you meet someone, you go on a few dates, and things are going well, and then you feel like it's reached some kind of threshold and you're ready to move on. So I think it's useful in that way. Yeah, but I'm gonna see what you have here.
Well, there's the old bumper sticker about, things happen, except with a expletive, right?
Yeah.
And and one thing that I've liked is the idea that, well, yeah, shit happens, but we can also shift that and we can understand that as shifts happen. So when we think about thresholds, we start thinking that, oh, shifts happen. And there's something settling for people to realize that whatever state they're in is not necessarily going to stick around. And invariably, it is going to change. That for many people, just knowing that whatever state they're in, and this is usually because it's unpleasant. So unpleasant activation is going to change, and it's not going to stay unpleasant activation. Same with unpleasant deactivation. That's not going to always stick around. But the same is true for pleasant activation. So if you're having pleasant activation and then it goes away, because invariably it will, well, sometimes we feel bad, like, oh, I should be somehow holding on to that. I should, like, this kind of good feeling, I should make sure I can keep it longer. And I often hear clients express disappointment and that somehow they're doing something wrong. So more than disappointment, that somehow I'm wrong, that I wasn't able to hold on to that good feeling longer. And so when we started talking about thresholds as being simply state changes or shifts that happen, it just takes off this pressure that I'm supposed to be doing something to make my system better in some way. So in that sense, I like the idea of the real simple way that I've talked about it, even though that is not sufficient in terms of organic intelligence. I do like that idea because it just takes pressure off of people. But the other thing that I think that is useful around thresholds is I think we can help people understand what they may be doing unconsciously or consciously, so by choice or not by choice, what they may be doing that could be impeding meeting those natural or those organic intensity thresholds. So are they doing something that continually keeps them from hitting that threshold? Or are they doing something that makes it so that they zoom by that threshold and they keep going into higher states of intensity? And can we support them in seeing that that's what's happening not necessarily giving a prescription to change it, but by noticing what might be unconscious, by bringing that into conscious awareness, there's a higher likelihood that that will then begin to there will be ways that the biology can continue to find its way to that natural organic or that organic intensity threshold. I don't know why I've suddenly started using the word natural, so somehow that's
I,
slipping in, but
that's cool and whatever. And I want to run with exactly what you're doing.
okay.
And I have an anecdote. I want to relay the anecdote and see what you have to say about it in relation to what you just said. So yesterday, I was hanging out with someone and I wanted to ask them a question. I won't share what the question is. That would be definitely over threshold for me. I would go crazy if I shared the question, maybe go crazy.
It
Um,
might be over threshold for the
over
audience
threshold,
too.
right?
So
Because
we'll trust. I'm going to trust that
and
inhibition.
I hope I don't accidentally share the question I wanted to ask. But if I do, maybe I do. Whatever. It's scary. This is actually scary in the moment. This is very much in the moment. So I wanted to ask a question, but I was hesitant because it was a. I don't know how he would react to the question, especially given the nature of this question. And so hanging out, and then just while we were hanging out, it was in my experience, it was like I want to ask him this question. Do I ask it? And then it would reach some kind of point, and I don't know, no, I won't. And then it disappears from my consciousness. And then a few moments later, and then I'm thinking about whatever. A few months later, I do want to ask the question. Should I ask it? Oh, I'm kind of scared. Do I ask this question? And then and then it kind of dissipated again. And there were several waves. I eventually did, and I knew if I asked the question, I don't know what's going to happen. Depending on how he responds, it may deactivate and it would chill back down, or it may raise all kind, Pandora's box. And I eventually did ask the question. So it was like, oh, I'm going to ask the question, and then I asked it. So I'm whatever in your prior volley when you were talking in whatever you were saying, any application of that
Huh?
to yeah.
Yeah. To me it's like that's I love that you're sharing that anecdote and obviously it was there's a certain level of awareness of what was happening to you in the moment that there was these rising intensities and yet that intensity sounds like several times iterations didn't hit threshold of actually like blurting out the question. Right. So it was there a little bit and then it'd come back down and then it would come back again, probably a little higher. And then, like a little more intensity, like, yeah, no, I really want to ask this. And that had to go through several cycles. And I think it's really helpful for people to see that our actions, whatever action we take, sometimes it just comes out, we just do, things happen all the time. We're always taking actions without a whole lot of thought. But then there's these other actions that are much more complex, right? Like to use the example of us having this conversation now, like what it took to get here, right? There were frequent conversations long before we did this, year, 2 years, maybe even before this started, of, okay, what's the action going to look like? Having a conversation and then things don't happen. Oh, and then there's something else that starts to happen, a little threshold, a little bit of action in the direction. Okay, that comes out. And that had to happen multiple layers before the final thing, this thing happened of having a free association conversation together. And so lots of people come in thinking, "Oh, I have this idea that I should create some kind of groups and do these groups and start marking them and create courses and all this stuff." And the reality is that might be 4 or 5 years down the line. I like the groups that I lead. I first thought about it 4 years before it actually happened, right? And there had to be all these minor steps. And if I looked at, oh, I'm not doing it. Oh, I'm not doing it. Oh, I'm not doing it.
Mm.
If I looked at the ultimate threshold of the completion of that act, I would just start feeling all kinds of shame and guilt for not having done the thing I think I want to do. But once I started to see that, oh, there's all these lower levels of thresholds to get to that action that needed to have take place first for myself and my own biology, and you, and things had to happen in your own biology that finally it felt okay to ask that question, such that whatever came of it, whatever intensity may or may not have come of it, you had capacity to hold. Right. And it
Right.
took a while to be able to go, can I handle that? Can I not handle it? Well, what happens if this? Yeah, I think I can handle this. Boom, question asked.
Yes.
Right? You could have left that meeting and not asked the question, and you have two choices. You can either go, oh, see, I didn't reach the threshold of asking the question. I should have asked the question. You could, beat yourself up by that. Or you can go, oh, I noticed there is an interest to do it. Oh, that interest got a little bit higher. Oh, we just didn't have sufficient time for it to finally meet that level. I wonder when that will happen. And
Yeah.
so again, there's freedom in ourselves when we recognize that there's within these large threshold ideas, there's many, many, many smaller thresholds that if we can recognize that, we can recognize the achievement or the competence or even derive pleasure from the state change of, oh, I felt a little nervousness. Should I ask this question? No, I didn't ask it. Right.
Yeah.
And even that can become pleasurable.
Yes.
And even if the question never got asked, like just the fact that that was the rising and the falling, that can be a pleasurable thing. And part of what I like to help people see is they're achieving thresholds all the time. Is it organizing and auto-organizing? That's a whole nother question. But it is helpful for people to again take pressure off of themselves that there's all these thresholds happening.
Yes. Thresholds that sometimes it's used to refer to engaging with the world in some way, some kind of achievement externally, like you were able to ask a question, you were able to ask the girl out on a date, you were able to start the bakery that you've always wanted to start. So thresholds could refer to world engagement things, and they can also refer to reaching organic intensity thresholds, which you may do even if you don't reach a worldly engagement threshold. So if you're thinking about asking a girl out or starting a bakery, just whatever's happening in your biology as you engage in those associations may reach organic intensity thresholds. You think about asking her out, and you don't, but still that activity of thinking about asking her out and almost doing it, or maybe almost doing it, and then not, but even if you don't do it, you still may have increased capacity because you reached an organic intensity threshold, which from organic intelligence perspective is the more important concept as opposed to external marker thresholds, right?
Yes.
Just from organic
Yes.
intelligence, if we're talking about organic intelligence theory,
Yep.
right? I'm gonna, if you want to comment on that in a moment, feel free to. But I want to, since a few minutes left, I want to. There's one more point I want to talk about,
Yeah.
which is sometimes. Okay, so organic intelligence helps you build capacity, and that's what I say and repeat all the time: capacity, capacity, capacity. So I repeat orientation, pleasure, and capacity all the time. There is a formulation that Steve, the founder of organic intelligence, sometimes uses, and the formulation is let's grow your thresholds. So sometimes it's grow your capacity, sometimes it's grow your bandwidth, and sometimes it's grow your thresholds. And I've encountered this formulation, which I've avoided because I'm not sure what I mean when I say it, even though it comes from the founder, that formulation. But I wonder what is meant there, like grow your thresholds. I don't know if this is an important point or whatever, but just what would be the examples? Like, would it be like grow your ability to enjoy your friends for longer periods of time without getting tired? Is that an example of growing a threshold, or grow your threshold for being able to drive without being scared? Are these concrete things, or is it just more of a loose thing and we don't have to worry about too much? Or
Yeah.
I've heard that grow your
I think,
threshold.
yeah, I think it's a great question, right? Because, part of what you've talked about is that growing capacity is about being able to handle with a certain level of neutrality what happens in life, right? So that, and most people think about it in terms of the bad things that happen in life, but it can also be about the good things that happen in life. It's possible that really good things happen, and it's hard to be able to experience that because there's not a capacity for experiencing that kind of energy, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. And so growing thresholds to me is the idea that your capacity to be with whatever is in life is growing, and to the point where it just is on a certain level, that these things that happen in life, you can go, well, isn't that interesting? right? Like that, it just is. You get to be curious about it or enjoy it. But either way, it's not that intense. And it's kind of a weird thing, right? Like we think about, you know, the lower we work with people, we want them to work with lower levels of intensity, like curiosity, interest, and enjoyment, contentment. I mean, these low levels, and we want them to practice in that range. And yet, the more our thresholds grow, it's like the more everything becomes that, right?
Hmm.
Like most of life is just around curiosity, interest, enjoyment, contentment. It's low level intensity. That's what we get to experience. That no matter pleasant or unpleasant, it's like, oh, this is a thing. I can be with it. I may or may not like it. I was just talking to somebody the other day who um, did a whole dental procedure when they were younger without Novocaine, wanted to just do it through meditation, and how profound it was to do that. It's funny, she's like, I wouldn't do that today, but at the time, it was an exquisite experience to feel the pain and the pain pleasure dichotomy, the same, same side of the two coins, or two sides of the same coin. And how sometimes I feel like that's part of what happens in life, that we get less even differentiated in terms of what's pleasure and what's pain, that it all becomes just life. And that's part of what happens when we quote unquote grow thresholds. Um, that's how I understand the word. I don't know if you have a final thought that you want to say as our time is winding up.
No, I think it's enough just to raise that question, just to flag that you'll sometimes encounter that the formula. It's not so frequent, but it's sometimes there. Grow your thresholds, and I think that's a different formulation of grow your capacity, and I lean towards capacity, that term capacity.
Yeah, I would agree. I
Um,
would agree
yeah,
that's a clearer. And, you know, as you said earlier, it's not something that we're doing to ourselves, right? Like you mentioned just offhandedly the idea that we can't quote unquote do our own thresholds, that really what we can do is get out of the way more often than not and allow our biology to do what it knows how to do, which is move in the direction of auto-organization as long as we're not interfering with that process.
yeah. I've lately entertained a metaphor for organic intelligence of mainstream, like if your digestion isn't working, mainstream therapy would be the bone broth, the turmeric, the L-glutamine, whatever. It's just whatever you're doing to try to restore your digestion. And then organic intelligence, auto organization, is digestion, properly functioning digestion.
Right.
uh anyway, sorry if that was kind of off of the threshold thing, but um thank you. To learn more about either of us and the coaching we offer, there will be links in the description. To learn more about organic intelligence, you can read my writing on Substack, link in the description, and explore my video library on YouTube, including the short videos. I meticulously craft my Substack posts and YouTube videos to present substantive content that's direct, clear, and concise. Rena, thank you as usual. I enjoyed our time,
Thank
and I
you.
look forward to the next week.
Yeah, me too. It's good to talk together.
Very good to talk to you.